other things you've studied in A and P so far, especially your respiratory system and your urinary system. So we will understand the fluid balance in our body, electrolyte. So they can conduct electricity. That's why it's called electrolytes, like sodium, chloride, balance in our body, and acid-base balance in our body. Why should we know this? Because it is vital for homeostasis of all these three elements for life. We will also talk about where in the human body is all the fluid held. It is called, the fluid inside the cell is called intracellular fluid, and outside the cell is extracellular fluid. And we'll study the effect of hormones that will play a huge role in this homeostasis of these three elements. Among the electrolytes, we are going to focus on the sodium ion, which is the most important. And we'll study the buffering system. We touched on it when we studied the respiratory system. So we'll revisit the buffering system and as to how a pH is maintained in the intercellular and extracellular fluids. So what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is a balance or a state of equilibrium of water, electrolytes, and acid base. So these three balances is what we're going to focus on. So for homeostasis in the human body, it is collectively accomplished by the urinary system, the respiratory, digestive, integumentary, endocrine, nervous, cardiovascular, and lymphatic systems. So all the systems will work together to maintain homeostasis. So for a cell to be alive, these three has to be in balance. So a cell function depends on homeostasis because we have to, for a cell to be alive, a cell has to be in an isotonic state. You know, hypertonic situations and hypotonic solutions will not work for it. So, and the cell requires a constant influx of nutrients and oxygen. And then there should be a constant garbage disposal, you know, efflux of waste materials for the cell to be alive. So the cell is in harmony with its surrounding fluids. So when we say fluid balance, what does that mean? So it means the water, the total quantity of water is constant between the intracellular, that means the fluid that is found inside the cell or the cytoplasm, and extracellular fluid, which is found outside the cell. So the extracellular fluid can be the interstitial fluid, the plasma, your lymph, you know, all the other liquids in your body are considered to be extracellular fluids. When you say electrolyte balance, they are referring to the homeostasis of ions. There are like 6 important ions that we'll look at, but we'll focus only on the sodium ion. Acid-base balance. This is the pH of your extracellular fluid. The pH ideally has to be between 7.35 to 7.45. So pH is a logarithmic scale. So you know, it has a very narrow range when we look at the pH here. And this is maintained by either gain or loss of hydrogen ions. So these 3 is what we're going to be studying now. See, this slide is so interesting. It's talking about the water content in humans. See, it's like, you know, we all know water is so important to us, but we tend to forget to drink water. We wait until we are thirsty. So here, see the water content. This picture is showing as to how, like with development, the fetus, baby, adolescence, then you become an adult and then become an elderly person. So this is the life cycle of a human being. And you can see that the water content changes. Isn't it so interesting? See, children are about 80% water, child 70% water, adults are like 60 to 65% water. And with old age, The elderly are only like 50 to 55% water. So this is the changes in water content of the human body. So for an adult, there's a lot of water. 60% of your body is water. And it also differs with male and female. So these two, the picture in the bottom is talking about water content in males and females. So the water content in males is higher because the muscle mass is higher in male, genetics. So muscles can hold more water compared to fat. Women have more fat content in their body. So water content is low. And then it's talking about the distribution. The ICF is 33% in men and 21% ECF and plasma and solids. So this is the distribution of water in an adult male. This picture is talking about the distribution of water in an adult female, which is slightly less. So water content in our body decreases as we get old. Muscle tissue, water content is higher than fat tissue. That is why males have more water compared to females. So this also talks about the demand of water being higher in males here. So let's next talk about where the fluid is held in our body, fluid compartments of the body. So here's a very descriptive picture that depicts this. So here, so we saw that the adult body contains about 60% of the body weight is water. 40% is found inside the cell as intracellular fluid. 20% is extracellular fluid. So 2/3 of the volume is intracellular fluid. And when you say extracellular fluid, 20% is in blood plasma, it's shown in red here. 80% is found outside cells, and in the spaces between cells, it's the interstitial fluid. Other places where you'll find fluid in the human body would be your lymph, in your eyes, in your joints, in the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. So it's written here, serous membranes, in the cavities, pericardial cavity. So there are many other places in our body where you find liquids. So here, this picture is talking about the importance of water in the body. Water plays a huge role in temperature homeostasis of your body. It regulates your body temperature. It protects your organs. It is so important for digestion and absorption of nutrients. So all the chemical reactions in the human body or metabolism happens in an aqueous environment. We are like a walking wetland. So for absorption to happen, we need water. For defecation to happen, we need water. Water is found in all the cavities, pericardial cavity, peritoneal cavity, in the pleural cavity. They all will reduce friction. They act as lubricants. They are found in the joints. And water is so important so that it maintains the sufficient blood volume so that the kidneys can act well. And of course, a big part of your blood plasma is mostly water. So water is vital for life. That's why they say water is life. Without water, there's no life in the ecosystem, in the environment. And there's no life in the human body also. So more important things about water. You would have heard water is a universal solvent. That means many solutes can easily dissolve in water. The two main things that's found in water are electrolytes. As the word indicates, when it dissociates in water, it becomes ions. See, Na plus, Cl minus, they are ions. That means they can conduct electric current. And these electrolytes are mainly important for maintaining the osmolarity of blood. Non-electrolytes will be, they do not break up into ions in water. They are organic molecules. They do not have an electric charge. Good example is glucose, fats, some proteins. So here are the main electrolytes in our body: calcium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, sodium. So we already saw calcium is very important for muscle contraction, for nerve function, blood clotting, cell division. Calcium important for bones and teeth. Chloride and sodium are very important for maintaining the fluid balance in our body. Potassium's very important for heart contractions, heart muscle contraction. Magnesium is also playing a huge role in muscle contraction, nerve function. So these are highly essential electrolytes, and they have to be in a certain normal range. When this range is upset, it will lead to disease, and then if it is prolonged over a period of time, it will lead to death. And here this picture is talking about some of the common disorders of electrolyte imbalance in the body: muscle spasm, weakness, twitching, headaches. You can't think clearly when you're dehydrated. Uh, so irregular heartbeat. So these are all like serious symptoms of imbalance in the body. This picture is talking about the electrolyte composition in blood, interstitial fluid, or ECF, and intracellular fluid. So in any typical or a normal situation, this is what we are going to see. So you can see that the inside, so this is inside the cell and then outside the cell. Outside the cell, the sodium ion concentration and chloride ion concentration is high. Whereas inside the cell, the potassium concentration is high and phosphate concentration will be high. The same message is also depicted in this graph here. See, sodium ion concentration is high outside the cell. It's also, so that means it's high in blood plasma and ECF, whereas it's low inside the cell. Similar situation happening with chlorine also. On the other hand, if you take potassium and phosphates, they are high inside the cell. So these are important features of the electrolyte composition of body fluids. So there is a continuous mixing of all the fluids in our body. So here's a nice picture that will show how everything in our body mixes very well. So here's the lungs. So the blood is going to visit every organ in the body and every tissue in the body. So when blood flows through the lungs, it is going to get rid of carbon dioxide and it picks up oxygen. And then it will flow over the digestive tract. And here it's going to pick up all the nutrients. And then it will give all the tissues their oxygen. It is also going to pick up metabolic waste from all the tissues. It will give the nutrients to the tissues and pick up all the metabolic waste. Then the same blood will flow to the kidneys. So every 30 minutes, all the blood will visit the kidneys. And kidneys will play a huge role in the electrolyte balance. So this will get rid of all the excess sodium, excess water. If there's not enough water, it will hold on to water. So it's a very vital organ. Two things to understand here is osmotic pressure. Osmotic pressure is the pressure that develops when two solutions are separated by a concentration gradient. So they are separated by selectively permeable membranes in the human body. So osmotic pressure is because of the electrolytes that are found in the liquid part. Hydrostatic pressure refers to the pressure that is exerted by the liquid. So water balance, we're going to talk about water balance in the human body. To be properly hydrated, we know this already. The water that you take in must be equal to the water that you're losing. So water balance in our body is very, very important. See, how long can you live without water? Only a couple of days, right? When we hear stories of people who were stranded in the ocean, at the most 2 or 3 days. Uh, so, water is very important for life. So, let's see where the water enters the body. So, we need about 250 ml of water to sustain life. 1500 ml comes from water that you drink and from beverages. 30% of the water that enters our body comes from foods, and 10% is metabolic waste. See, when we studied cellular respiration, one of the glucose will combine with oxygen, and the byproducts are carbon dioxide and water. So, that is metabolic waste. So, this is how water enters the body. And how do we lose water? 4% is lost in the fecus, 8% through sweat. Insensible loss is the loss through skin and by breathing, by lungs. And most of the water we get rid of by urination. So this is the magic number here. 2500 ml of water is required by the body. And the picture on the left talks about the water input into the body, and outside is how we are going to lose water in the body. So the left and the right should be in balance for water homeostasis to happen. So there are three main hormones that play a huge role in fluid and electrolyte balance: antidiuretic hormone, aldosterone, and natriuretic peptides. So these are either made in the heart or in the brain. There are two sources for these peptides. So first we are going to talk about water homeostasis, thirst mechanism. So this is where the antidiuretic hormone will come into place. And so here there are receptors in the hypothalamus, osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus, and also a dry mouth can trigger the receptors. So the body is picking up on plasma osmolarity. The blood has lost, that means you're dehydrated. The solute concentration is high. So plasma osmolarity is high. So when that happens, it's the hypothalamus, the first line of defense, will perceive the dry mouth and the osmolarity, and it's a cascade of reactions. So the hypothalamus is stimulated. This will trigger a sensation of thirst that will make the person to drink water. So as soon as the water moistens your throat and your mouth, stretch receptors in the stomach will respond. Your stomach will enlarge and water will be absorbed in the gut, thereby maintaining the water content. Another way it can restore water is by picking up the loss in plasma volume. So plasma volume has dropped. So when the volume of water drops, your blood pressure will also drop. The juxtaglomerular cells. So these cells are found in the kidney. So here's a picture of the juxtaglomerular cells. They will make renin, which will trigger the renin-angiotensin mechanism. So this, like, one hormone will activate another hormone, and so forth. It is called renin angiotensin aldosterone mechanism. Angiotensin 2 can also stimulate the osmo receptors in the hypothalamus, thereby asking the person to drink. So the hypothalamic thirst center is stimulated by a decline in plasma volume or by an increase in plasma osmolarity by baroreceptors. So through a cascade of reactions, it will trigger a thirst, sensation of thirst, And then the person will drink water and it will restore the water balance. Oh, I forgot to mention here, one of the most common ways to see if a person is dehydrated, they will pinch the back of the palm here. So if the skin forms a peak, then means they are dehydrated. If you're hydrated, it won't form a peak. It will bounce back quickly. The elasticity of the skin will be high. Let's take a look at how antidiuretic hormone, is also called vasopressin, plays a role in water balance. So here, the osmolarity has increased. The water, you're dehydrated. That's why the osmolarity has increased, and the sodium ion concentration in the plasma has increased. This is again going to stimulate the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. So this, we already saw that how the hypothalamus will secrete antidiuretic hormone through the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. So the antidiuretic hormone will target the collecting ducts of the nephrons in the kidneys, and then it will command it to absorb water and sodium. Another way is when plasma volume reduces, your blood pressure drops. This signal will be picked up by the baroreceptors in your heart in the atrial wall. And then that also can stimulate ADH. ADH will act on the collecting ducts, resulting in water reabsorption, so that you will pee less. Water reabsorption happens in the collecting ducts because of the antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormones will play a huge role in maintaining the water balance in the body. Because it's absorbing more water in the collecting duct, your urine will be more concentrated. Baroreceptors in your heart atrial wall can also stimulate ADH production. So here in the atrium of your heart, baroreceptors means stretch receptors. So when the blood volume is correct, they will stretch optimally. But if it doesn't stretch enough, it can trigger. See, these are the juxtaglomerular cells of the nephron. So it can trigger the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone ways method to retain more water in the kidneys. So it's called natriuretic peptides. If it's found in the atrium, it's ANP. In the brain, it is BNP. So these are released by cardiac cells in response to abnormal stretching of the heart walls. So this is a very important system. So the renin. So renin is made by the juxtaglomerular cells in the kidneys. Angiotensin is made in the liver. So renin has to activate angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. And the lungs has to make ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, to angiotensin 2. So you can see how all the different organs in our body play a huge role in maintaining blood pressure, fluid and electrolyte balance. And it's angiotensin 2 that is going to increase the sympathetic activity. It will ask the tubes of the nephron to reabsorb sodium and chloride. So when sodium is reabsorbed, chlorine will follow and water will follow. Angiotensin 2 can ask the adrenal cortex to make aldosterone. And it's aldosterone that will make the sodium reabsorption and water reabsorption. Angiotensin 2 can also result in vasoconstriction, thereby increasing the blood pressure. The posterior pituitary gland will secrete ADH by the hypothalamus. That will also result in reabsorption of water in the urine filtrate, thereby increasing the blood pressure and blood volume. So this system you have to know, because many of the drugs will interact with one of the components of the system here. This slide is a summary slide of everything that I've told you. So everything in green is the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. What's shown in orange are the baroreceptors, the natriuretic peptides, and antidiuretic hormone and its effect on holding on to water is shown in pink. So this is a summary slide as to how all the different body organs are working together to maintain homeostasis of blood pressure and blood volume. So sodium, how is sodium maintained in our body? Let's say the sodium ion concentration drops and the potassium ion concentration increases. Another way is this dropping sodium levels is also picked up by the renin angiotensin mechanism. They will stimulate the adrenal cortex. So this is the suprarenal gland that is found on top of the kidneys. The cortex is going to secrete aldosterone. Aldosterone's mode of action is the distal collecting tubes of the kidneys. It will ask those tubes to reabsorb sodium and to get rid of potassium, thereby maintaining the sodium balance in our body. Sodium is so important. Too much is bad for us, and too little is also bad. The next is acid-base balance. So, acidity means hydrogen ion concentration is very high, right? Vinegar is very acidic. Your stomach acid is very acidic, meaning hydrogen ion concentration is high. Acid-base balance is vital for life. If you remember, see the proteins and enzymes. Most of the enzymes in our body are all proteins, and they have to be in their optimal pH. So if the protein loses its structure, its function is also lost. So all the biochemical reactions that happen in the body, the optimal pH is 7.35 to 7.45. Arterial blood 7.4, venous blood 7.35. Inside the cell it is 7. If the pH goes more than 7.45, we call it as alkalosis or alkalema. If it is prolonged, it will lead to death. If the pH drops between 7.35, is called acidosis or acidemia. So both of them can result in malfunction of body organs, coma, cardiac failure, and all the systems will collapse. So acid-base balance is vital for life. So how does our body maintain the acid-base balance? It can either use a chemical buffer. A chemical buffer are chemicals that will stop changes in pH by binding to the hydrogen when a pH drops, or releasing a hydrogen when pH rises. The other most popular system that we've studied earlier when we studied the respiratory system is the bicarbonate buffering system. So the carbon dioxide that is released as a byproduct in metabolism will combine with water, and this enzyme carbonic anhydrase will convert it to carbonic acid. So acidity results that can dissociate to form hydrogen and bicarbonate, which are powerful buffers. So they are the buffering system of our body. So where does the hydrogen ion come in our body? So hydrogen ions are byproducts of metabolism. Either cellular respiration. Remember anaerobic cellular respiration, glycolysis, lactic acid can be formed, or proteins can break down to form acids, fats can break down to form acids. So just byproducts of metabolism is hydrogen ions. So your body has to have efficient mechanisms to neutralize the hydrogen ions that are made. So here Aerobic respiration of glucose can form carbonic acid. Anaerobic respiration can result in lactic acid. Oxidation of fats, they produce acidic ketone bodies. Oxidation of sulfur containing amino acids and proteins will result in sulfuric acid. Hydrolysis of phosphorus and nucleic acid will produce a phosphoric acid. So there's many sources of hydrogen in the human body. So let's look at the buffering systems. So here, the main buffering system in the intracellular or ICF is the phosphate buffering system. So the phosphate buffering system will buffer the pH inside the cell and also in urine. Extracellular buffering in the system in the ECF or extracellular fluid is carbonic acid bicarbonate buffering system. In both of them, proteins can also act as powerful buffering systems. So both in ICF and ECF. Hemoglobin buffering system. So if you remember the structure of proteins, remember it will have a carboxyl end and an amino end. So the carboxyl end can accept an electron, accept a proton, a hydrogen atom, thereby reducing the pH. So the amino acids act as powerful buffers too. And there are also plasmoproteins that can act as buffers. So the protein buffering system contribute to the regulation of pH of both the ECF and ICF. So let's see, you already saw how lungs play a role in buffering pH of blood. So lungs, so it is called respiratory compensation. When lungs play a role, it's called respiratory compensation. When kidneys actively play a role in getting rid of hydrogen ions, it's called renal compensation. Lungs regulate pH through carbonic acid bicarbonate buffering system. By changing the respiratory rate, it can change the partial carbon dioxide content. Kidneys regulate pH through renal compensation. They will maintain acid-base balance by excreting hydrogen ions and reabsorbing bicarbonate ions. So this picture here is an illustration. So when your body, so the partial carbon dioxide concentration in blood should only be 40 to 45 mm of mercury. And the pH we saw has to hover between 7.5 and 7.45. If the partial carbon dioxide rises, right, carbonic acid will be formed. And then because of that, acidosis will develop. If, on the other hand, if pH drops, so this is like a yin and yang as to how the pH can vary because of the partial carbon dioxide content. So they are inversely proportional. So this picture as to how the respiratory system takes care of the carbon dioxide and gets rid of carbon dioxide is shown in this picture here. So the carbon dioxide that is released as a metabolic waste in the tissues, 7% of the carbon dioxide will dissolve in the plasma. 93% will enter the red blood cells of the hemoglobin. So this is a hemoglobin molecule. 93% is entering the hemoglobin molecule. 23% will combine to form carbaminohemoglobin. 70% is converted to carbonic acid by carbonic anhydrase. This will quickly dissociate. The bicarbonate ion will be kicked out into the plasma in exchange for a chloride. It's called as a chloride shift. And the hydrogen that is the hydrogen of the carbonic acid will be buffered by the hemoglobin molecule. And when the hemoglobin, when it visits the lungs, you exhale it out. So the respiratory system can reduce the blood pH by removing the carbon dioxide from blood. Respiratory acidosis can occur when lungs cannot do this properly. So that is a dangerous situation. So what we have learned as of date until now is that the fluid balance, electrolyte balance, acid base balance is vital for life. And we saw the intracellular and extracellular uh, compartments in the body. We saw how the hormones, the antidiuretic hormone, the renin, angiotensin, all of them play a huge role in maintaining the water balance and the sodium balance in our body. And we saw how the movement of fluids will take place between the ICF and ECF to maintain homeostasis. We saw the buffering systems in our body that maintain pH. So we'll watch this interesting video here. This is talking about sodium. So I think it's dark.
You may be loading up on more salt than you actually realize. Dr. Mehmet Oz of the Dr. Oz Show shared some ways to cut down on sodium to help you live better now. Dr. Oz, we did a recent story where the USDA re-examined the food pyramid that we're all taught. And what came out of that was that sodium is a big problem for us.
Maybe 100,000 lives a year lost because of too much salt in our diets. And you think to yourself, how could that possibly be? Most people do not get the salt in their life because of how they salt their food. It's already in all the products we eat. So let me give you a couple numbers if you don't mind, Rob.
Okay.
A teaspoonful of salt is the amount that you're allowed to have in a day. It's 2,300 milligrams. Now, my advice as a heart surgeon is try to get it down to 1,500 milligrams, especially if you have any risk factors. The number one thing that salt does is cause high blood pressure. And for some people, it's a big issue. But for all of us across the board, we have too much salt in our diet. Simple example, diet soda. You might think it's not a big deal, right?
Well,
turns out that diet soda has a lot of salt in it.
I mean, 35 milligrams or something. Come on, is that a lot?
Not a
I
lot.
can have 2,300